Greetings everyone. Here are the main points in today's video. The August shock. Russia's oil lifeline suddenly drops straight to zero in Turkey. Moscow's second largest seaborne crude oil importer, Turkey, has suddenly completely locked out all Urals oil tankers, strategically pushing the Kremlin's vital revenue source into an unprecedented collapse. The iron hand of Montreux, the Black Sea Fleet, has been broken and permanently imprisoned, all by a 90-year-old power. At the two narrow straits, Ankara has officially isolated the battlefield, causing all Russian destroyers and escort ships to be permanently sunk, never having the chance to receive reinforcements from outside. Another blow, top-secret weapons. Turkey is quietly rebuilding the navy for Ukraine, from packages of ATA ballistic missiles, rapid transfers to advanced stealth frigates being built right at the Istanbul shipyard. Ankara is creating a force strong enough to confront the Black Sea Fleet head-on. Military bankruptcy and frozen salaries. The war machine is on the brink of exhaustion as the budget deficit surpasses 77 billion USD, forcing the Kremlin to ruthlessly cut new recruit bonuses and freeze salaries at strategic shipyards. The war of attrition is now officially taking a heavy toll on the Russian economy. Welcome to the analysis program of Luan Banqian-Su. Before we get into the details, we hope you can take a few seconds to like the video and subscribe to the channel to support the team. Thank you to our audience. Putin is restless. Turkey has taken action to lock down the Black Sea, delivering another blow by supplying top-secret weapons to Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a time when the Black Sea completely revolved around the axis of power in Crimea under the strict control of the Kremlin. The Sevastopol naval base stood tall and was once considered an impregnable fortress, the ultimate symbol of President Vladimir Putin's naval power to dominate this entire sea. But today, things have taken a brutal turn. The once famous Black Sea Fleet has been driven out of Crimea, forced to retreat to its last safe haven at the port of Novorossiysk. All Russian military and economic presence across the entire sea is now squeezed into a single choke point. Ironically, the power currently guarding that vital maritime lifeline is Turkey. The Black Sea is essentially a vast inland sea, and its only gateway to the world's oceans lies entirely within two narrow straits, the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. Thanks to the authority granted by the Montreux Convention of 1936, Ankara holds the key to life and death at this strategic choke point. Since the conflict erupted in 2022, Turkey has exercised that authority by blocking both straits to warships while closely monitoring every single oil tanker, grain ships, and Russia's entire shadow fleet under strict surveillance. No matter how great Moscow's maritime ambitions are, the gateway that determines their fate remains firmly in the hands of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. On this chessboard of calculated moves, Ankara has just delivered a sudden and dangerous blow directly at its opponent's lifeline. Turkey has officially frozen the flow of imported oil from Russia. A detailed report from Reuters, published on August 14th, exposed a stark reality. Throughout August, not a single shipment of Urals crude oil, a strategic export for Moscow, was scheduled for delivery to Turkey. The collapse of this transport route happened at breakneck speed, just as the war of attrition entered its fourth year, pushing Russia's treasury to the breaking point. Looking back at the data, in June, Turkey was still importing up to 1.2 million tons of oil from Russian ports. By July, this number immediately plummeted to 900,000 tons of that total. The amount of oil transported through the Black Sea was drastically reduced from 600,000 tons to only 300,000 tons. Then, by August, the strategic breaking point truly appeared. The volume of direct oil exports from Russia to Turkey dropped straight down to zero. The only two rare ships that docked at the port that month, carrying just 200,000 tons, were carrying Kazakh crude oil exempt from sanctions while transiting through Russia. Losing the Turkish market was a heavy blow to the Kremlin's war machine. When the West simultaneously shut its doors to Russian energy in 2022, Turkey became a huge lifeline, stepping in to fill the gap and rising to become the world's second-largest buyer of seaborne Urals oil, just behind India. For 4 consecutive years, the Turkish market served as a solid pillar, pouring billions of dollars into Moscow's treasury, a lifeline that Russia always believed was absolutely stable and inviolable. However, the disappearance of such a huge market in just 2 months originated from the fiery situation on the ground in the Black Sea. Since the end of May, ships operating in these waters, including those linked to Turkey, have continuously suffered fierce attacks. According to battlefield damage statistics from the Fair Key Independent, just from July 6th alone, Ukrainian drone and suicide boat attacks have struck up to 218 ships belonging to Russia's Shadow Fleet, specializing in evading sanctions. The port of Novorossiysk and its vital oil storage system have been repeatedly engulfed in barrages of fire, causing maritime transport there to become paralyzed and extremely risky. Even the Caspian Pipeline Consortium TPC transit station, which handles Kazakh oil, had to temporarily suspend operations for a whole week in July, causing a 1/5 drop in loading volume. In retaliation, Russia also targeted civilian cargo ships carrying grain and fertilizer around the Odessa corridor, pushing the entire Black Sea into a spiral of uncontrollable conflict. In response to this dangerous escalation, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan on August 8 issued a serious security assessment. The fighting had gone beyond military ports and warships, spreading into indiscriminate attacks on all commercial vessels. Not stopping at diplomatic warnings, Ankara immediately imposed temporary maritime restrictions on commercial ships traveling from the Dardanelles Strait toward Novorossiysk. At the same time, Turkey firmly established a new diplomatic front at the heart of the crisis, demanding both warring sides accept a maritime ceasefire and completely end attacks on ships throughout the Black Sea. A brutal strategic vice is gradually closing in around the Kremlin, starting from the tense diplomatic moves directly revealed by Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. The proposal to establish a maritime ceasefire zone, originally from Kiev, was mediated by Ankara and delivered directly to Moscow, placing the full responsibility squarely on President Vladimir Putin's side. However, the attacks were not limited to the sea. From across the Atlantic, Washington delivered devastating sanctions by blacklisting the two energy giants Lukoil and Rosneft. This was followed by harsh embargoes from the European Union, completely banning the trade of fuel products derived from Russian oil. This economic pincer has tightened around Turkish refineries for months, forcing the energy conglomerate Tüpraş to cut Russian oil imports by up to 69% as early as last winter. The supply plummeting to zero in August was in fact the inevitable result after a series of suffocating days during which Ukrainian drones decisively shut off the last oil valve. Even though Ankara cleverly disguised this leverage as commercial risk management, the actual losses inflicted on Russia's treasury remain a stark and irreparable reality. Alongside tightening Moscow's energy cash flow, Ankara provided substantial military support to Kiev, a move officially recognized in the U.S. Congress. According to U.S. congressional records, Turkey transferred a nearly $300 million weapons aid package directly from its own military reserves to Ukraine, including 70 ATA tactical ballistic missiles, 12 M270 multiple launch rocket systems, and tens of thousands of powerful artillery shells. This is the largest U.S.-Korea standard arms transfer Ankara has ever arranged, directly alleviating Ukraine's deep strike firepower shortage just as its strategic reserves were running low. Turkey's position was further strengthened as Ankara became the focal point of the NATO summit, turning the forum into a launchpad for Ukraine's armed diplomacy. On the sidelines of the summit,
President Volodymyr Zelensky signed 3 drone cooperation agreements with Denmark, Estonia and the Netherlands, bringing the total number of technology transfer agreements, joint ventures for production and international funding based on Ukraine's battlefield experience to 9. Also at this event, former President Donald Trump unexpectedly reversed his stance with a pledge to purchase Ukraine's own drone models, while President Erdogan, for the first time, publicly supported the NATO mechanism for financing American weapons purchases for Kiev. This turning point confirms that Ankara is the summit venue where the architecture of international rearmament is being shaped. The future naval posture in the Black Sea, where Russia has just lost its dominance, is also being solidified right at the Tuzla shipyard in Istanbul. 2 modern ADA-class stealth frigates are taking shape, with the Hetman Ivan Mazepa currently undergoing sea trials to prepare for its future role as the flagship of the Ukrainian Navy. Its sister ship, named Hetman Ivan Vyhovsky, is expected to be delivered in early 2027, equipped with vertical launch systems fully compatible with Neptune anti-ship cruise missiles, the weapon that once turned Russian warships into ruins. This class of warship is fully capable of facing off on equal terms with any remaining vessels of the Black Sea Fleet. Strictly adhering to the Montreux Convention, Turkey is blocking these ships from passing through the straits while the conflict is ongoing. But once the fighting ends, Ukraine's battle-hardened naval force will immediately deploy. That military connection has also been deeply rooted on the ground since the early days of the war through the symbol of the Bayraktar TB2 drone, the pledge to rebuild a $100 million production plant from the ashes of the Baykar Group. Jet engines made in Ukraine are roaring inside the Kizilelma stealth unmanned fighter, along with a range of lethal equipment from heavy machine guns to advanced electronic warfare systems. In addition, Turkey, along with Romania and Bulgaria, is leading a special group to clear Black Sea mines and is ready to take command of the naval component in any future regional security structure. This two-pronged pressure is causing severe damage to Moscow's war machine, exposing a serious financial crisis through figures from Russia's Ministry of Finance. Oil and gas revenues have dropped by as much as 38% in just the first 4 months of the year, making 2025 the worst budget deficit year since 1996, with a deficit of about $70 billion. And in just the first half of 2026, the budget gap has continued to widen, surpassing $77 billion, while war expenses are consuming nearly half of the entire national budget. The drop in revenue has forced the Kremlin to ruthlessly slash even the most essential spending. The first item to be cut is the salaries and allowances of soldiers. More than 10 regions in Russia have been forced to sharply reduce recruitment bonuses for contract soldiers as local budgets fall into a state of emergency. In the Samara region, the enlistment bonus has been slashed from about $36,000 down to just $4,000. The St. Petersburg authorities have completely cancelled the mayor's $18,000 subsidy. Even the Yakutia region in Siberia has suspended all payments to forces outside the front lines. Even death benefits paid to the families of wounded and fallen soldiers have also been delayed for a long time, exposing a harsh arithmetic on the battlefield when financial resources are no longer enough to sustain the massive war machine. At the peak of the local mobilization waves, just the budget for signing bonuses for enlistment contracts cost the Moscow authorities more than $21 million per Dalton Y. But now,
that financial pipeline is drying up rapidly, leading to cracks even within the most secretive defense industrial bases, which are considered the heart of the war machine. At the Yaroslavl shipyard, one of Russia's vital military shipbuilding facilities, the salaries of more than 850 engineers and skilled workers have been frozen for months because the Russian Ministry of Defense has defaulted and delayed payments on military contracts. Even the most strategic military-industrial complexes can no longer pay salaries on time, and this impact is felt directly on the front lines with telling numbers. Based on Russia's public financial data, German economic researcher Janis Misklu points out that recruitment in the first quarter of 2026 has dropped by 20%, falling to a 3-year low with an average of only about 800 new contracts per Dalton Y. Despite recruitment bonuses being pushed to record highs, the bitter paradox is clear. The Kremlin is paying a much higher price to attract an ever-shrinking number of new recruits. As a result, the pace of Russian ground offensives in 2026 has noticeably stalled. As the coffers run dry, administrative coercion will inevitably have to replace financial incentives. The withdrawal of the Turkish market is a critical blow, pushing Russia's entire economic cycle to the brink. In theory,
the volume of crude oil rejected by Ankara could theoretically be redirected to Asia, where India and China are absorbing up to 85 to 90% of Russia's total seaborne crude oil exports. However, the hidden logistical costs behind this pivot are extremely high. Russia's Urals crude oil is being forced to sell at a steep discount, $10 to $12 per barrel below Brent crude. The voyages span thousands of miles and last for weeks. The cost of chartering ships, the massive oil tanker fees along with exorbitant insurance costs for the shadow fleet are eroding almost all profit margins from each shipment. As the customer circle shrinks, all bargaining power and price-setting rights fall entirely into the hands of Beijing and New Delhi. As sharply observed by international traders, Moscow now has only two options: either accept higher discounts or offload oil or proactively cut production. Both paths lead to a harsh outcome, strangling national budget revenues. Export volumes may be temporarily maintained, but actual cash flow cannot be salvaged. This loss of revenue is the starting link in a chain reaction. Battlefield bonuses are cut, shipyard workers' salaries are delayed, and tactical offensives on the front lines gradually stall.
While Moscow's treasury sinks into crisis, Turkish refineries are carrying out a bold and decisive restructuring of their supply sources. To fill the huge gap left by Russian and Kazakh crude, Turkish importers have proactively reached across the Atlantic, locking in large-scale import contracts from Brazil and Guyana. This strategic choice is based on precise technical factors. Guyana's Liza and Payara grades, along with Brazil's deepwater oil, have chemical properties perfectly compatible with Turkey's already calibrated refining systems. More importantly, the transatlantic shipping route is an absolutely safe corridor, free of suicide boats, naval blockades, and all war risks. Ankara's energy map immediately changed color. The US quickly rose to become Turkey's second-largest crude supplier, just after Russia, alongside a surge from Iraq's Basra oil, sanction-exempt Kazakh oil, and shipments from Libya, Norway, and Saudi Arabia. This smooth transition is proof of the foresight of Tupras and Star Refinery, which have steadfastly pursued supply diversification for years. Although this blending process incurs some additional operational costs, the end result is irreversible. Turkey's domestic energy flow remains smooth, while total imports from Russia in July fell to a record low since May 2021. The shift in power on the Black Sea chessboard reveals a harsh truth. The ultimate winner is not the force with the largest war fleet, but the nation holding the golden key to the region's maritime gateway. That key is the Montreal Convention of 1936. For 9 decades, this convention has granted Ankara supreme authority to maintain free trade in peacetime and impose a total blockade on warships during military conflict. Since early 2022, Turkey has exercised this power with cold precision. Not a single warship from the Black Sea Fleet that was sunk can be replaced. No reinforcements from the Baltic, Northern, or Pacific fleets can pass through the straits to support the battlefield. All landing ships.
Every Russian-guided missile frigate lying at the bottom of the sea is a permanent, irrecoverable loss. Even so, many believe that Turkey's suspension of Russian crude oil imports is only temporary, and the unloading schedule could be reactivated if Russia agrees to offer a sufficiently attractive discount on Urals crude. Instead, Ankara still insists that this is simply a matter of commercial risk management rather than a political sanction, as evidenced by the fact that natural gas continues to flow steadily through the Turk Stream pipeline and bilateral trade relations are still maintained. So, in your opinion, is Turkey's freezing of crude oil imports a strategic and irreparable break between Ankara and Moscow?